In the vast landscape of legal history, there are verdicts that echo far beyond the courtroom walls, decisions that shake public confidence, redefine justice, and spark fierce debate for years to come. This is the story of one such verdict, a jury's decision that not only stunned a nation, but also altered the course of law and society. The jury that changed history did so not merely by the case they judged, but by the ripples their controversial verdict created, raising profound questions about fairness, bias, and the very nature of justice. The case at the center of this seismic event involved a high-profile defendant accused of a crime that gripped the public imagination from the start. It was a complex trial, filled with conflicting evidence, passionate testimonies, and a media frenzy that transformed every moment into a spectacle. The defendant faced charges serious enough to carry severe penalties, and the prosecution presented what seemed to be compelling evidence. However, beneath the surface, the story was far from straightforward. The jury was carefully selected after a lengthy vetting process designed to ensure impartiality. 12 individuals from diverse backgrounds, different ages, and life experiences were sworn in. They came into the courtroom with no knowledge of the case, but what they faced over the following weeks would test their understanding of truth and justice in ways few could anticipate. The jury's role was simple in theory, but incredibly challenging in practice: to weigh evidence and deliver a fair verdict based solely on facts presented. During the trial, tension mounted as prosecutors and defense attorneys battled fiercely over every piece of evidence. Witnesses offered contradictory accounts, forensic experts debated interpretations, and key documents appeared to both implicate and exonerate the defendant. The jury listened intently, often struggling to reconcile what seemed like irreconcilable facts. This trial exposed the jury to the complexity of truth, where black and white blurred into countless shades of gray. Public opinion was polarized from the start. Media outlets took sides, pundits aired heated opinions, and social media buzzed with theories and accusations. The case transcended its legal boundaries and became a cultural flashpoint. Every update was dissected and debated by millions, creating a pressure cooker environment not only for those inside the courtroom, but also for the jurors themselves, who knew their decision would be scrutinized by the entire nation. As the trial neared its end, the jury retired to deliberate. Behind closed doors, the 12 jurors faced the monumental task of sifting through reams of testimony, exhibits, and legal instructions. The process was arduous and often emotionally draining. Jurors disagreed fiercely on what the evidence truly meant, some convinced of guilt, others swayed by reasonable doubt. This internal struggle revealed the human element of juries, ordinary people wrestling with extraordinary responsibility. Days stretched into weeks as the jury debated, argued, and reconsidered every detail. Some jurors tried to find common ground, seeking a verdict that would satisfy the legal standards and their conscience. Others held firm to their interpretations, unwilling to compromise on what they believed justice required. The pressure to reach consensus was immense, complicated by the weight of public attention and the high stakes involved. When the verdict was finally announced, the courtroom fell into stunned silence, followed by a wave of shock and outrage from the public. The jury acquitted the defendant on most charges, a decision that surprised many given the prosecution's seemingly strong case. The verdict divided the nation. Some hailed it as a triumph of justice and fairness. Others condemned it as a miscarriage and failure of the legal system. This controversial verdict revealed deep fractures in society's perception of justice. For some, it underscored the principle that every accused deserves the presumption of innocence, and that reasonable doubt must prevail over public opinion. For others, it exposed systemic flaws, including biases, gaps in evidence, or failures in prosecutorial conduct. The intense debates that followed sparked protests, calls for legal reforms, and a reassessment of how trials and juries function. Looking deeper, the case highlighted the power and limits of the jury system. Juries are designed to bring community values into the courtroom, to represent a cross-section of society's conscience. Yet, this case showed how personal beliefs, emotions, and interpretations can influence verdicts, sometimes in ways that clash with legal experts or public expectations. It raised questions about jury selection processes, juror education, and whether 12 people can truly represent the complex truths in high-stakes cases. Engage for a moment with the juror's perspective. Imagine the isolation and burden they faced, knowing their decision would be dissected endlessly and potentially alter lives forever. Jurors do not take their role lightly, and in this case, their struggle reflects the broader challenge of balancing justice with humanity in a flawed system. It reveals how the jury is both a guardian and a vulnerable element of justice. The aftermath of the verdict extended beyond the courtroom. Lawmakers and legal scholars revisited policies related to jury trials, evidence disclosure, and prosecutorial standards. Some jurisdictions introduced reforms aimed at increasing transparency and fairness, such as enhanced juror instructions or stricter rules on evidence admissibility. Meanwhile, advocacy groups on both sides of the issue mobilized to educate the public on the importance of due process and the dangers of rushing to judgment. Media coverage of the case remained intense for months, analyzing every detail of the trial and the jury's deliberations that became public through interviews and released statements. The story served as a case study in law schools and sparked documentaries exploring the complexities of jury decision-making in criminal justice. The public learned more about how juries work and why their verdicts, while sometimes controversial, are essential to the legal process. This jury's decision also had a lasting impact on the defendant's life, for better or worse. Acquitted in the eyes of the law, the defendant nonetheless faced a public divided on whether justice was served. The case affected their reputation, relationships, and future prospects. It underscored how legal outcomes and public opinion do not always align, complicating the notion of closure or vindication. Reflecting on this story reveals a universal truth about justice. It is rarely simple or absolute. The jury that changed history reminds us that legal systems are human institutions subject to imperfections, emotions, and conflicting interpretations. It challenges society to strive for improvements while respecting the foundational principles of fairness and the presumption of innocence. The jury's decision highlighted how personal biases and backgrounds can subtly influence jurors' interpretations of evidence, reminding us that even the most carefully selected jury is made up of human beings whose perspectives shape the outcome in ways no legal instruction can fully control. Before concluding, consider the broader lessons. This case demonstrates the importance of jury service, the need for better support and education for jurors, and the critical role that transparency plays in maintaining public trust. It also highlights how controversial verdicts can serve as catalysts for reflection and reform, pushing the legal system toward greater accountability and equity. Would you believe that some landmark legal changes stem directly from public reactions to this verdict? Laws on evidence standards, jury instructions, and prosecutorial accountability were debated and amended in several regions, illustrating how a single case can drive systemic evolution. In closing, the story of the jury that changed history is a powerful reminder of the delicate balance between law, justice, and society. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about fairness, bias, and the human element behind every verdict. The controversy surrounding this case remains a touchstone for discussions on how justice is delivered and perceived, and why it matters deeply to every one of us. If you find the dynamics of real court cases and their social impact compelling, stay with us for more deep dives into moments where the law and humanity collide, revealing truths that resonate far beyond the courtroom.